It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Senator Rich Crandall from Arizona. He is the Senate Education Chair in that fine state. Senator Crandall.
Good morning. It is my pleasure to open this exciting session with Governor Bush and Governor Wise. I've been anticipating this meeting that we're going to go through for the next hour and a half for several months. Since August, I've had the privilege of participating in the Digital Learning Council, which is a group of roughly 100 leaders from business, education, technology, government, philanthropy, think tanks, all with the task of developing the roadmap of reform for local, state, and federal policymakers and lawmakers. Now, this task force got me in a little bit of trouble last week because I have several daughters and one young son. And my young son brought me his Christmas wish list last week, and he says, "Dad, I want an iPad." Well, in my knee-jerk way, I said, "There's no way you're getting a $600 iPad for Christmas." And what does every young kid say when you bring up cost at Christmas time? "Oh, Dad, Santa is going to bring it." And so I had to think quick, which I'm not known to do. And so knowing that his grandma, my mother grew up on a dairy farm in Montana, I said, "You know, Rhett," his name's Rhett, "this whole technology, internet thing, it's just a fad. It's going to be gone January, February. We're all going back to grandma's farm in Kalispell, and we're going to work the dairy farm." Well, I'm here to tell you that we're about to find out that this is definitely not a fad. This is going to be a benchmark meeting that you will look back on, that you were in this room as these 10 ideas were rolled out, these 10 principles. In a few moments, Governor Bush and Governor Wise are going to share with us the work of this incredible Digital Learning Council. We participated in at least 40, in subgroups, 40 different conference calls. And these are not the conference calls that I know many of you do, where you put your phone on mute and you sit back and do your work and hope that you hear when your name's called, and then you real quick turn it off mute. We know everyone does that. These were real engaging conversations about what it would mean, what will digital learning look like in the United States going forward. I was at the iNACOL conference here a couple weeks ago in Glendale, Arizona, with many of you in this room. And at that conference, one of the speakers showed a ski map of one of the Denver ski resorts and said, "This is what the U.S. education system should look like. You bring your class to the bottom, and those who want to try a double diamond do that. Those who want to do the blue square can do that. But each student gets to tackle what they're ready for. And that's what digital learning and technology will enable." So with that, we are going to watch a quick video introduction and then turn it over to others who will take the program.
Imagine an education system where every child achieves their learning potential, where every child gains the knowledge and skills needed to succeed in college and a career, and where every child is fully prepared to pursue their dreams. A decade ago, this idea was just a dream. But today, the schools we imagine can become a reality. Schools where students learn in their own style, at their own pace, and move on when they're ready. Schools where students can access rich and rigorous content, where the walls come down when computers and devices power up. Schools where teachers once again can impart wisdom, mentor, and coach pupils, and the instruction is personalized. Schools where students are engaged in their own education and empowered with the tools to achieve. We have the power to transform education. It's time for Digital Learning Now.
Good morning. The very first thing I want to do is ask my fellow members of the Digital Learning Council to please stand up and be recognized for the great work you did. Up, up, up. I'm Giselle Huff, Executive Director of the Jacqueline Hume Foundation in San Francisco, and I'd like to start this morning on a personal note. I came to America as a little girl in 1947. Having survived the horrors of the Second World War in France, where 13 members of my immediate family were murdered in the Holocaust. When my mother and I came to New York, we had $400 in our pocket, and we spoke no English. that I stand before you today is a tribute to the American dream and the public schools I attended to help me attain it. For those of you who have children in college, let me just interject here that in 1968, I attended Hunter College for a tuition fee of $55 a semester. So now let's fast forward to July of 2005. When I heard Clayton Christensen, the author with Michael Horn and Curtis Johnson of the seminal book, Disrupting Class, speak at the Education Commission of the state's annual conference, and he applied his theory of disruptive innovation to the education industry. The proverbial light bulb went on, and I was converted to the belief that the only way to increase productivity in the education industry and the quality of its product was by introducing technology into the way American children learn. In the next 3 years, when I brought up the topic, people would say, "Here comes Giselle again with her obsession about technology," and eyes would glaze over. Then about 2 years ago, there was a marked shift in the conversation, and here we are today, 500 strong, waiting to hear about the work of the Digital Learning Council. To put things into perspective, let me remind you that since the publication of A Nation at Risk 27 years ago, we have seen an endless stream of what Clayton calls sustaining innovations, attempts to improve the product without changing the system that delivers it. Small class size, the Annenberg gift, whole school models, the small school movement, charter schools, and the réforme du jour, merit pay, a flurry of incremental tweaks to the system while children's performance has remained flat. Incrementalism and the mediocrity it perpetuates in our education system are unacceptable when the world is flat. After the Second World War, the United States was the only country among our main competitors that was not devastated by its ravages. We became complacent and rested on our laurels, while the rest of the world leapfrogged ahead of us, driven by the same desire to reach the middle class that has driven Americans since the turn of the 20th century. Those nations' success is based in great measure on the commitment they have made to educating their children. If we don't do something now and use our comparative advantage to transform how we educate ours, we will witness the end of the American dream. We're here today to start a revolution, and it will be led by two visionaries who are willing to go to the barricades for our kids. Governor Bush is chair of the Foundation for Excellence in Education and the host of this summit. He served as governor of Florida from 1999 to 2007. During his 2 terms, Bush championed bold reforms in education, including the well-known, very famous Florida Virtual School. Governor Wise is president of the Alliance for Excellent Education. He served as governor of West Virginia from 2001 to 2005. During that time, West Virginia saw a significant increase in the number of students completing high school and entering college. The Alliance recently published a powerful issue brief entitled "The Online Learning Imperative, a Solution to 3 Looming Crises in Education." 2 weeks ago, I visited an amazing blended model in Yuma, Arizona, that combines online learning with teacher-led instruction in a building configured for the 21st century. It's called the Carpe Diem School. And if you remember your Latin, that means seize the day. Today marks the beginning of our doing just that And to tell us how the future will happen, help me welcome Governor Bush and Governor Wise.
Thank you, Giselle, very much. All I can say after hearing your remarks is amen, sister.
Yes, sir.
No need to describe the challenge because I think Giselle's done it in a very elegant manner with tremendous passion and a lack of complacency, which is, I think, the greatest problem our country faces today, not just in education, but certainly perhaps most evident in education. We're complacent, and we know we shouldn't be complacent in a world that's ever changing. So one of the ways maybe to strike a little energy into the policy debate is what Governor Wise and the Digital Learning Council, what we've been doing over the last 6 months. I thank the members for everything that they've done. I'm excited about this, and I'm looking forward to get raring to go because as Michael Barber said, Sir Michael, excuse me, as he said, you know, it's great ideas are really important. Passing laws based on those great ideas are important, but 90% of the work is the execution. And there are people in this room that can help us in the execution of a good idea. We'll tear down the barriers of entry, but we're going to have to execute over a sustained period of time, and we're counting on you to be part of this effort. Governor Wise, thank you for everything that you've done, and after your remarks, we'll go through our 10 elements of high-quality digital learning.
Thank you, Governor Bush, and I want to thank you very much for your leadership, pulling us all together, not only at this incredible conference, but also over the many months in creating the Digital Learning Council. I just want to I have to say about Giselle, you heard the passion, you heard the commitment. My introduction to Giselle was she was the first person who ever talked to me about using avatars in education. At that point, I knew that I was in the presence of somebody who was a visionary and delighted, and it's sort of like, I don't know about you, I used to try to ride horses now and then. What I learned early on is you don't control that horse, you just get on and sort of, you're on for the ride. Well, with Giselle, she's taken us all on an incredible ride, and I want to thank you, Giselle, for getting us here. For Governor Bush, the opportunity to partner with you in this nonpartisan manner on something that we so strongly believe in, transforming our nation's education, but it will transform our economic system as well, has been a great experience. And I look forward not only to what we're about to announce today, but also as we move forward. And particularly those of you on the Digital Learning Council, there are 100 people, and there were a number of you in this room, but I know that many more in the spirit of today are watching digitally and participating in this webcast. You had the meetings, the 70 to 80 meetings. I don't think there was one in-person meeting, but there were 70 to 80 digital meetings going on for many, many, many hours. What I have learned about the power of a digital meeting is you get great ideas and you do all that and you never buy one lunch. It's an amazing phenomenon. But the many hours and hard work and dedication that have taken to get everyone to this point. So improving our nation's graduation rates, ensuring that all students graduate or that they're prepared for college, career, and a high quality of life, that's our challenge, and that's what today is about. The effective use and application of technology. And this is about assisting our educators, bringing them the tools they need, the environment they need, bringing high quality content that assists our teachers, our educators, focus on high-quality instruction, and yes, as Michael Barber said, on high-quality learning and student outcomes. So the opportunity that digital learning offers comes at a critical time as there are three looming crises: declining state federal revenues. Interestingly enough, the Federal Deficit Commission meets today with possible recommendations. And so the challenge then is, we know we can't do things the same way. Do we really want to? And so the second is mounting teacher challenges, shortages in key subject areas and also regions of the country, and increased global demand for skilled workers. We heard the panel of CEOs yesterday talk about the need for a much more highly skilled workforce. Digital learning provides us that opportunity to deal with each of these concerns. It's time to move this debate forward, or this discussion forward. Education, according to the Department of Commerce, ranks 55 out of 55 industries according and effectively utilizing technology for our students. And yet our students, the digital natives, use it every day in nearly every aspect of their lives. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a classic moment. Demand for higher quality is up, and revenues are level or down. So this is our moment, the moment of innovation, our time to be bold, our time to be transformational. When every governor, every state legislator will convene in January, you have a choice. Hunker down and just try to do the same with less to get even less outcome, or to take the bold steps that are necessary. Innovate or stagnate. That's what these 10 principles are about. They're about innovation. And incidentally, let's remove one word from our lexicon right now. This is not about our future. This is about making our present. Governor?
Thank you, Bob. So are we going to see the elements on the screen, or this is, you all have a card if you need to have a play-by-play guide to go along with this. The Digital Learning Council came up with 10 elements that we'd like to go through, and then we're going to ask Tom Vander Ark, who led us in this effort, to come up, and we'll have a question and answer, a dialogue with you all. The first element is student eligibility. All students are digital learners, and that's as much an observation as a policy objective. And the fact is that every child, as was said, I think, yesterday, whenever I get pictures taken, that's kind of waning in my life. Thankfully, today, people don't get all eager to take a picture with the old guy anymore, and that's good. But I could almost guarantee you anybody under 30 can actually use a camera properly. Anybody over 30 can't. And if you think about all the tools of the digital learning environment, they're used in everyday life for every child. It is just a part of their life. They're tweeting, they're texting, they're using these tools in a way that improves their lives and makes their lives more enjoyable. So every student in America, or close to every student, is eligible to access the digital learning environment. This is not a great challenge. So the second question is more of a declaration, which is that has to do with eligibility. If we're going to create the perfect digital learning environment in our 50 states, how would we do it? Our belief is that everybody should be eligible for digital learning, whether you're in a public school or in a charter school. Every child, or any environment, every child should be eligible for funding. The best example of that today is the Florida Virtual School, which provides access. Anybody can access it. Homeschool kids that are going to private schools, and of course many children in the public school setting. They provide, Julie, 250,000 courses estimated this year in a format which is totally open. And I think this first element is an important one, to make sure that we define public education as educating the public, and the public is more than anxious to do this.
Governor, I do have to just note, you mentioned the digital camera and having your picture taken. I knew that I had made the transition last night totally from public life to private life when I got asked to take the picture of Governor Christie with a constituent.
I yearn for the day.
So the second element, all student access. All students have access to high-quality digital content and online courses. Access is the first step as we move forward on digital learning. And before we even begin moving forward on eligibility, we must make sure there's adequate access for all students. Technology can break down many borders that prevent many students who may be geographically challenged, similarly because of where they live, from seeking opportunities available in other parts of the state or country, or maybe even just across town. Those include opportunities to learn, but also for opportunities for students to be exposed to careers and life experiences not typically available in the area that they live. Through digital learning, a class being provided in a large urban area can be accessed by a rural student, hundreds of miles away, without that student having to travel to take the course. Now think about the economics for a moment. So we have 5 students in 3 schools, total of 15 students. But there are 5 in each school. and they want a particular course, perhaps it's Arabic, or perhaps it's Mandarin, or perhaps it's calculus, do we, on limited budgets and times and skill levels, do we provide a single teacher in each of those schools? Or via online, do we have one teacher that is able to teach in all three of those schools digitally? If the digital content is high quality and state approved, there's no reason not to allow students to access courses regardless of where they're located. Students don't stop learning anymore at the state line or the district line, and school districts should not stop access at the border. For instance, how many of you, let's be honest with one another, I'm getting older, so on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, I did not go to the mall. I chose not to go to the mall. It was a conscious decision. I, quite frankly, went online. Now, what if there'd been a regulation that said, you can go online, but you have to go to the mall to pick up the product? That's what we're doing in some of our states. And so digital learning can break down geographic barriers, but also barriers that prevent some traditional learning environments from being available to all students. There's no reason to regulate class size in the cyber world of learning. Why cap enrollment when there's capacity to meet the demand? Why artificially limit the budget for digital learning, which might actually save money overall? Removing, or in some cases avoiding, the temptation to control these variables will unleash the power of digital learning. And finally, in the digital age, we should be requiring all students to take a digital course. Michigan and Alabama are already making this a requirement. And so that's something that we ought to provide for our students as well. All students have access to quality digital learning.
Just to add to the point, that's a very powerful point if you're trying to create a marketplace for creating high-quality content. It's okay to mandate it if it's a high priority. We mandate Algebra 1 courses in almost every state. We mandate in states more focused on higher standards, Algebra 2 and geometry. We mandate biology. It seems to me in the world that we're in and that we're moving towards to mandate online courses has the benefit of recognition that that's the type of learning that's going to take place in higher education and community colleges, and also the recognition that creating a marketplace in coordination with the teachers, for anybody watching this, because most of this will take place in a hybrid format, is important. So kudos to Michigan and Alabama for being the first 2 states to begin that process, and I hope many other states do the same. The third element is personalized learning. All students can customize their education using digital content through an approved provider. Here's the simple fact. We now live in a world where students can learn in a customized way. That did not exist 50 years ago, but the great majority of teaching taking place this morning across the United States applies the same techniques that existed 50 years ago when we've had this vast new array of ways to teach children. We know children learn differently, and they learn at different paces. Embracing the digital learning revolution, if you will, and customizing the learning experience will create huge opportunities for student advancement. Imagine the strategies that would be in place if we already had this at the core of what we did. 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, I guess, in Florida, we eliminated the idea of social promotion in 3rd grade. So we had 30% of the students in 3rd grade in Florida that were below basic readers, and based on the policy that was passed, they could not go to 4th grade until there was remediation and a change in that existence. In this kind of environment, children would not advance until they learned the material, and students that were being held back because the teachers had to teach to the median would be liberated to be able to learn faster. I think this is perhaps the most important element of what we're talking about. The customized learning environment shifts the focus to the student and away from a system that has worked, definitely has worked, but it is antiquated for the 21st century. So imagine having schools not be defined by when school starts and when school ends, but defined by when the student accomplishes the work. There are examples of this, and one of the things I think is really important in public policy, Bob, is to identify the leaders, if you will, those that are out on the frontiers to be able to show that this is not like weird science that we're talking about. This happens in industry all the time. It happens in training. It happens in entertainment. It also happens in education. Rocket ship education is a good example of how this can work. This charter school company operates charter schools in San Jose, California. Many of you know about this great school. The original one opened in 2006 and is located in one of the poorest neighborhoods of San Jose. Its student population is 70% English language learners and 90% low income. Today, based on the Accountability System California, this school is the third highest rated school in the state. And how are they doing it? They take 1.5 hours of digital instruction as well as traditional classroom instruction. Each student attends 1 block of math and science, 1 block of learning lab, and 2 blocks of literacy and social studies each day. In the learning lab, students work on computers and focus on individual learning needs. It's customized. Because the learning lab doesn't require certified teachers, Rocket Ship can reduce staffing and pay their teachers more. That kind of hybrid of learning can be done in 1,000 different ways if we take this element as a serious part of our strategy to change policies across the state.
Well, and as you point out, it's reaching students where they live and where they need. Michael Horn, Clayton Christensen write in Disrupting Class about the non-consumer, and that's how technology gets started so many ways. In, for instance, in being used to reach those students who have dropped out, those young people who dropped out of high school. They're not coming back into that brick and mortar school, but they can be reached through digital learning, through credit recovery, through a number of other measures, through applications that are already being used in higher education. And so that's also about tailoring to that particular student. And so as the student's moving along, we want to talk about advancement. And so that's the fourth principle. Student advancement and students progress based upon demonstrated competency. Demonstrated competency, not how long they sit in a chair. Now, you all will not be considered as having benefited from this conference unless you sit there for another 4.5 hours while we drill and kill. That's what this is about. So when students have mastered the material, they should move on, regardless of time of year. Likewise, students should not move on simply because of the time of year. The focus would shift from just showing up in class to learning and achievement. It would help students strong in one area move on to a new area while allowing those students who need to work to devote more time to a weak subject. I guess the best example, many of you are going to leave today to fly to many far-flung parts of the country. Now, if you're fortunate enough and you get a good tailwind and you actually land early, 20 minutes early, for instance, as happened the other day with me, are you going to demand that that plane stop and just stay there because you want the full 20 minutes extra more
I want
that
the
you
damn
paid
gate
for?
open, by the
Yeah.
way, which never happens either.
Yeah. So I don't think so. Well, why do we require our students to stay and wait on the same time when a student needs more time? So under this model, seat time becomes obsolete. Students, not government, not regulation, decides how much time they need to learn, some more, some less. And think how liberating this is for students, because now they're managing their education to meet their learning potential. More students would learn and fewer would drop out. How cost effective can this be when we're saving students perhaps a year in the K-12 system? Or if they're staying in the full K-12 period, they're taking early college that they're getting credit for and saving time on the higher ed end of it. There's no greater indicator of success than measuring whether a student has mastered a subject. As personalized learning becomes more commonplace with students working at their own pace, advancing students through demonstrated competency is the best way to assess if digital learning is truly working.
So the fifth element is content, that digital content, instructional materials, and online and blended learning courses are of high quality. This is actually a real challenge. From a policy perspective, you want to make sure that you have the most open, transparent, abundant content, and at the same time, you want to make sure that that content meets the standards and expectations of the system and of the citizens of the state in which you're serving. We actually have a pretty good solution to that because that plays out in policy in all sorts of interesting ways, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Believe it or not, there are people that are lobbyists that try to use these conversations as a way to create barriers of entry, and then there are cases where you calibrate incorrectly and you allow shoddy operators to come in a way that disadvantages the students. So these are challenges, but one of the things I think offers great hope in this regard is the implementation of Common Core standards that is underway right now through the K-12 experience for math and for reading. Imagine the huge opportunity here of having the reason why I like Common Core standards is this will create an acceleration for the digital learning revolution. Number one, it will allow for content providers to provide content over a larger number of people, creating scale and opportunity of lower costs at higher quality. I also believe it's hugely important, back to Sir Michael's comments, that they're common, that's okay, but they're higher, which is hugely important, and they're benchmarked to world-class standards, which without that, all of this seems to be, in my mind, completely irrelevant. So the path to higher quality, it doesn't have to be heavy regulation, which is the standard of the old way. But we need to find a way to create the proper protections, and the opportunity here, I think, is in the Common Core standards for language arts and math.
Governor, I just think I agree with you. The state-led effort to come together with the Common Core standards, and 48 governors committed to it well over a year ago. I believe 44 states, as of yesterday, have actually adopted the Common Core. I mean, this gives so now the states have coming together have set a common goal. Everybody figures out how they're going to get there. But one of the ways to get there, particularly in terms of the implementation in terms of curriculum and assessments and professional development and so on, is through digital learning. And that brings us to the sixth element of instruction. Digital instruction and teachers are high quality because the teacher is the critical element. And great teachers produce great students wherever they live or learn. Digital learning extends the reach of an effective teacher. I think the military analogy is so apt here. Digital learning is the force multiplier for a quality teacher. It gives that teacher the ability now to have the highest quality content and at the same time now some time to focus on the individual learning needs of the individual student. One size no longer fits all, and that teacher can truly respond to those students. So that if a student in a rural area in West Virginia or an urban area in Detroit wants to take a course in forensic science or Mandarin Chinese, why be denied the opportunity because the school doesn't have a teacher or staff qualified to teach the class? The fact is that with digital learning, that opportunity becomes a reality. I used the example yesterday, one state, 440 high schools, 88 certified physics teachers. How do we get quality content married with effective teachers in those classrooms? Students can access great teachers all over the country, but we have to give them the tools and the opportunities. So digital learning also helps educators. Technology and digital learning tools will help assist teachers more effectively to do their job. It is also an incredibly important professional development tool because now high quality instruction for both student and high quality professional development for teachers. Just like student learning can truly be the transformational change. Assisted by digital content, teachers now can concentrate on the central mission, working with each student to maximize each student's learning opportunities and outcomes.
Just to add one quick story, when I was governor, we were concerned that because we had pretty good data, a nerdy governor could ask all sorts of nerdy questions. One of the questions I asked was, how many DNF schools have access to AP courses and how many don't? AB schools, how many do they have? And as you might expect, the schools that were higher performing had huge access to AP teachers in their schools, and they did quite well. The underperforming schools did not have access to the higher challenging IB courses or AP courses. And so how do you solve that problem immediately with a sense of urgency? You do it online. And over a 3-year period with proper funding, Florida now leads the nation in the terms of number of low-income kids that take and pass AP classes. These tools are tools for rising student achievement, and you can do it in a very focused and sharp way. Number 7. We're on number 7, aren't we, Governor?
Yes.
All students, this is about providers, all students have access to multiple high-quality providers. This is a place, I think, to tear down the old way. I'm a little older than Giselle, so I'm not quite as passionate and have a sense of a little wiser and have a little slower than you. But I do love the sense that, look, we're all not going to be around this much longer. We got to get this done. And there are things that can be done in proper policy to accelerate this, and this element is important. All students should have access to multiple high-quality providers. And how the states go about regulating this will be hugely important. And here's where I think teachers are going to eventually, with good education and proper input, will see the benefit of this, that their roles will be incredibly enriched and much more important in many ways, as they are the intermediaries of this digital content, and they're the coaches and the logistical officers and the encouragers of students in a totally different setting. And so my belief is that having a diverse number of providers allowed in is hugely important. It would be, to use a Governor Wise analogy, it would be to require everybody in this room to wear white tennis shoes and white shirts to come to this gathering, and that would be the accepted thing because we've been doing it that way. There would be an outright rebellion, and I think in education we need to have a myriad of providers, high quality in their focus, where teachers are at the core of this for the great majority. Not all. There are many students can do this in an online setting, and many do it quite well right now. But for the vast majority of students, my guess is that the hybrid learning environment will be the place that it's done, and we should have let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah, it's actually not. So that forever ends the day. As I recall, there's a famous quote attributed to Henry Ford that one time he said, when somebody said, well, what color Model T can I buy? He said, you can buy any Model T you want as long as it's black. So what this does is truly make sure that people are able to select the kind of education, the kind of content that's so critical to them. The eighth element, very critical element, assessment and accountability. Student learning is the metric for evaluating the quality of content and instruction. As we move forward in the future, the question should be, are students learning what they will need to know to succeed in college and careers? Now, assessments, often a much disputed subject, can truly be informative, and they're obviously instrumental. And with the initiative now that our states are involved in, and every state is involved in at least one of two consortia, Smarter Balanced or PARC, and some of states are involved in both, to develop a set of common assessments that reflect what students need to know under the Common Core. And we heard yesterday in Oregon, state standardized tests being administered online. Indiana implementing a similar system. Making the test digital expedites scoring, which also has multiple benefits. Real-time returns to the teacher, so that particularly on a number of tests, so that teacher's getting it back now, within an hour, within a day, as opposed to waiting until the class moved on to the next grade. Results can be used to reward success and turn around failure. The results of the test should serve as the basis for measuring the quality of content and instruction. And at the end of the day, what matters most is whether students are effectively learning. If a student is effectively learning, then that's the best indicator that the approved digital content and the program must be working and is truly high quality. Just one other note. It has to be connected to a high quality data system, so that what those assessments reflect can affect critical decisions. Those millions of critical decisions made every day in the classroom by the teacher, those critical decisions are going to be made in the next several months by many of you in legislative committee rooms. So having quality data systems tied to quality digital assessments is an important element.
Number 9 is funding. Funding creates incentives for performance, options, and innovation. My guess is, as this is rolled out across the land, this might be one of the places where folks inside the existing education system might be a little concerned. Gerard, I always find money kind of drives a lot of the discussions in education policy, and I imagine that this won't be any different. The simple fact is that if we expect to overlay this on top of the existing system, it won't work. Just as technology is really an overlay on top of the current system today, school districts buy technology kind of as it's a provider-driven kind of deal, and they come and you end up, if you wander around schools these days, you see computers all over the place, but some of them aren't plugged in, dust is settling on them. It's not at the core of what goes on. The funding needs to be the catalyst, I think, to move to a different system, where states that really are focused on this have to recognize that they have to have a different system. There's not enough money in the world to lay on top of what exists a digital learning kind of environment. The one thing that I think is common now amongst all districts, because the funding formulas in every state are different, in many cases districts are different to take into consideration the diversity of the student populations, the one common element is that funding is based on attendance, it's based on seat time and not based on achievement. And perhaps the most provocative way to really make a statement about digital learning and its incredible benefit for teachers and for students is to move to a system that rewards achievement and innovation. The only alternative or only example that I'm aware of, and hopefully there are others that are emerging, is Florida Virtual School, which gets paid when a student completes the course and passes the course. And it seems to me that moving towards that model would create huge opportunities in the digital learning environment.
And you make such an excellent point. So many of our funding systems I'm always fascinated in the age of the computer, we're still administering education under a system that was basically developed in the days of the covered wagon. It's where each group of folks stopped their wagons and they did two things. They built a church and they built a one-room schoolhouse, then they elected a board, and then they immediately found the best educated person, usually someone who could at least read, to be the teacher, and began from there. And from that, a heck of an education system's developed, and it fueled this system in our country for many years. But now we have the computer, and so we've got to look at what's the infrastructure necessary to carry that forward. And so that gets to the final point, delivery, element number 10, infrastructure supports digital learning. If we want to shift to a digital age, we need to provide the infrastructure to support the digital learning. When we're designing a state-of-the-art community, we must have good infrastructure in place. I don't know too many developers that, well, actually I did know one that tries to sell you a house, but doesn't tell you that there's not a sewer system, there's not a road system. A lot of the things that you think were going to be forthcoming aren't.
He or she will remain nameless,
That he
correct?
or she will remain nameless. Likewise, we need good infrastructure in place to transform education. High-speed broadband, access to internet devices, flexible purchasing power, all must be in place to effectively use digital learning as a tool to transform education. We provide textbooks without cost to students. So I think there's a reasonable argument that internet access and access devices should be provided in the same manner. Because let's face it, the new textbook is the netbook, or the laptop, or the iPod, or the smartphone, whatever the particular device will be. And so every publisher understands that what is being currently spent on textbooks is going to be shifted, and that their role becomes a critically important role, but it's not textbook publishing, it's information dissemination. So we have to think differently. There's no shortage of ways to achieve the end goal, transforming education. Budget challenges can and they are, creating the opportunity for a transformational change. The technology exists to transform education. These 10 elements give us the opportunity, the roadmap, to be bold and innovative.
Governor, one more point about funding, because I know I got tire marks on my forehead. I just know that this is going to be a serious subject for people that are concerned about this. We spend more on education per student than any country in the world. I mean, this is not a question of the lack of resources. In fact, this is a solution to what I consider to be the next 10 years of stable funding at best for education across the country. And here are a couple of sources of money that could be changed, and Secretary Duncan's coming, for which we're very grateful to lunch. Why not use Title I money to allow states that embrace this agenda to be able to implement it in the Title I schools? We spend, I don't know how much money, billions of dollars through taxing, I think it's cell phones, that goes to schools to provide technology, but there's no accountability in that money. There's no auditing, there's no performance criteria, there's no checking of this stuff. Why not say that you could create a waiver for that money to be able to develop a strategy to implement the 10th element? I mean, we are not down on money.
That might be one of our first points to work on with digital learning now, because my observation, we did an analysis of each state and that amount of money that comes from that fund, and I can't tell you where it gets spent. And so this is certainly one area. We spend $1.3 billion, states that is, spend $1.3 billion on assessments. How is it that technology can provide, save money there that can be allocated towards improving the infrastructure? We've talked about earlier in this conference, talked about textbook expenditures and how that shifts over time to the digital infrastructure. So, but what it requires is the commitment to make the change.
Tom?
Thank you, governors. My name is Tom Vander Ark. I've had the good fortune to work with both of these governors for more than a decade. They were both great education governors that have gone on to make even larger education contributions at a national scale for the last 5 years. And so I want to start by thanking both of you for your work on this.
Thank you, Tom.
The interesting thing about digital learning, the language chosen was very intentional, because Governor Wise made West Virginia a leader in education technology, in using instructional technology in the classroom. And Governor Bush, you were a leader in online learning, and you've come together to create the Digital Learning Council, which brings both of them together around the promise of personalized, competency-based education, the new model, the opportunity to do education better and often for less money. And so it's been exciting for us as Digital Learning Council members to work with both of you. And so today, your organization, the Foundation for Excellence in Education, kicks off Digital Learning Now, a multi-year effort to advance the principles that the governors just laid out. And that effort will include support for each of the states. There'll be a set of resources developed to help you guide the pivot from print to digital, from classes to individual students. And Digital Learning Now will also be monitoring your progress as states, and a progress report will be issued this spring against each of these 10 principles. So,
Tom, how are we going to grade that, just out of curiosity?
the report that is issued this morning.
A, B, C, D, and F. So there's no lack of clarity.
I guess we
want to
made
make
that
sure
decision. Okay. Yeah, we'll use letter grades probably.
That's my only contribution. The rest of it,
Anyway, both this idea of the 10 principles was Governor Bush's idea. We met earlier this spring, and he said, I think states need guidance on this subject, and I immediately thought that was a fantastic idea, and I said, Governor Weiss just wrote this great paper that said digital learning is the only way to solve the teacher gap, the achievement gap, and the funding gap, and so both immediately embraced the potential of laying out this roadmap, and we borrowed heavily from Amy Gandera's work at the Data Quality Campaign, and we've tried to adapt it. One thing I really appreciated about both governors is they said, we have to do this fast. With 37 gubernatorial races, we have to be in the marketplace of ideas in December, and so we went very quickly, and we had tremendous contributions on a weekly basis, and some of our council members wrote long and frequent advice for the council. So the enthusiasm that was captured by your vision has really been tremendous, and I think you can both be really proud of the work product that was put out. I'd love to turn it over to you, and we have a few minutes for questions and comments for the governors.
Yeah. Governors, first of all, Mike Flanagan, State Superintendent of Michigan, and thanks for your leadership on this. And I wanted to also thank you for acknowledging Michigan's effort on that online requirement, and just mention in passing that this is our 4th year, and for those of you who are going to try to do this, governors, legislators, other chiefs, the status quo forces will go after you because they see it as breaking the monopoly. And just be prepared for that. But I'll tell you, the reward is so great because it also opened the door for, I found a little bit of authority as in the Constitution about the state superintendent that allowed me to give seat time waivers. And we have tens of thousands of kids full-time online now, and had hardly any battle with that because we had already taken on the battle for the requirement to begin with. So I applaud what you're doing, and I would just say, if you have any advice for folks that are ready to take that on and how they might get ready for the status quoers who are going to want to hold the monopoly and not open the door to this.
You're volunteering. It sounds like you're volunteering to be part of our Digital Learning Now effort.
I can do that. I'm actually sucking up now that I know you're giving grades out. I'm trying to make sure Michigan's.
That's the point. It seems to be working already.
Bruno Barend, Heartland Institute. Thank you very much for Digital Learning Council and Digital Learning Now. Isn't the easiest way to fund this, given that it's less expensive, to just make the case directly at the defenders of the status quo and saying, you've got the infrastructure, that infrastructure needs to be redeveloped and reapportioned and reallocated, so we're just going to take your infrastructure to fund our new infrastructure? And doesn't all of the things that we're talking about necessarily mean a reduction in workforce and employment, particularly on the administrative side?
I like the way you ease right into things, Bruno. It is a transformational change. I guess what I look at is I look at facts, and I look at a system that will no longer be able and can no longer sustain itself in its current operational mode. Whether you're looking at the state budget numbers, I keep coming back to that, whether you're looking at the outcomes that are indeed, some good news yesterday from America's Promise Alliance, that the dropout rate is actually improving, graduation rate is actually improving slightly, but we've got a long ways to go. That I look at the skill needs, we can't sustain the system. So it's not a case anymore of whether or not we can tinker around the edges. We can't. What we can do is to say to those who are involved, and I think we have a lot of folks that are involved in the educational system that are working very, very hard. But they got a problem. I think there are a lot of teachers that are working their hearts out. I think there are a lot of principals, educators, and so on. They got a problem. They're working in a very old model. And so even when they're going they're producing 110% of what that model's capable of, they're driving a 1965 Mustang. Lovely car. I'm a big car buff, if you haven't noticed. It's a lovely car, and it can drive all day at 60 miles an hour on the West Virginia Turnpike. But it doesn't have air conditioning, doesn't have environmental controls, doesn't have cup holders, much less an AM, FM radio, or the computerization that has more power than what took the Apollo astronauts to the moon. My point is this, that we've got to liberate folks from the model they're in. And I think that's the combination of the liberation plus the existing situation. The stimulus package ended on September the 30th. So the $787 billion that went to states to help prop budgets up isn't there. The $10 billion that went to help assist keep teacher jobs this year will be gone. There's no, and I don't mean to, well, Superman ain't coming in that regard. And so, therefore, states have to make very, very tough choices and have to reallocate. And I don't think that anybody, when confronted with that, will there be resistance? Sure, by some. But I think there are a whole bunch of others that say, we know we've got to change. Let us be involved in the discussion, but we know we've got to change, and it's coming regardless of what we're going to do. The question is whether we're going to be ahead of the change or constantly dragged along with it.
I think just one quick point. I think it's more than appropriate to mandate online courses as a path to begin to develop this. But I have enough experience, and I know Governor Wise does as well, that the bigger the idea, the more important it is to develop strategies to execute. And a lot of times people don't realize this is not, I mean, this is complicated. That's okay. But there are a lot of things that happen along the way as you're moving from one system to the next. You just can't mandate it. You just can't say, thou shalt do it this way now. There has to be a lot of leadership along the way. Every example of transformation that's been successful, in the midst of that transformation, there have been innovative leaders. Look, to talk about an element of that would be textbooks. Textbook publishers are the leaders in efforts now for digital content. The reason is that they look over the horizon further than we might, because this is where their shareholders are kind of concerned. And so they are rapidly transforming their businesses to take advantage of this opportunity. And so that requires leadership. It's really hard for someone to say you're making a ton of money on something and then we have to stop it. We have to prepare for its end. Netflix is a fantastic example. My wife and I love the DVDs. Now we've just been told that it's going to cost more because they're moving us to the next platform that they know will be much more competitive, which is the streaming. So here are companies that are cannibalizing their own businesses to prepare for the next challenge. That's the kind of leadership that's necessary in this effort. So we're going to have to find a governor and a commissioner of education or title equivalent, and legislators that are willing to stick with this, and then business communities and other people and teachers unions, hopefully, that will see this as a huge opportunity. The final thing about jobs, because the state that figures this out, and states are competitive, are going to have a huge economic development advantage. Not just in the United States, but globally, because developing that content will really be a pretty cool business.
See, I think that one of the real development for a state like West Virginia, for instance, we've got a lot of high-quality content teachers, many of whom are retiring. With digital learning, they can be teaching anywhere in the country on their time, on their schedule, meeting students' needs, and they don't have to stand up for 8 hours a day in a classroom after they've been doing it for 25 or 30 years. So I think that, as the governor says, the states, the teacher organizations, whatnot, that recognize where this is going, seize that opportunity, it's a job creator.
Let me just build on the leadership point. If you have a governor or chief, or if you're a policymaker, start with a digital learning summit. The chief from Virginia, Gerard Robinson, is here. He, a few weeks ago, held a Innovate to Educate. There's a link to it in the Digital Learning Now report. Take a quick look at that. A lot of the people that are in the first few tables were at that summit and helped that state create a new vision for what's possible. All of the organizations that are represented on the executive committee are ready to help you build a leadership initiative in your state. Susan Patrick is here from iNACOL. Doug Levin is here from the state ed tech directors. Dane is from NGA. We have SIIA. All of these organizations are ready to help you build a leadership initiative in your state and put a plan together.
Are we finished, Patricia?
I think we are going to have to wrap up because of our timeline, but I am going to take a point of personal privilege here on this issue. As your cruise director, many of you may or may not know I'm a new mom. I have a 2-month-old baby daughter, Isabella Grace. I have pictures on my iPhone I'll carry around and show you all. She is going to be the graduating class of 2027. I want Isabella to go to school in an education environment that's completely different than Mommy did 40 years ago. Isabella should get up in the morning, which means the state policymakers here, you have to look at your certification laws, your funding laws, your access laws, your textbook policy laws. Isabella should go to school in a completely different environment where maybe she goes to school for 2 or 3 hours in the morning with a teacher in a classroom, and she comes home and takes Spanish online with Mommy so Mommy can learn Spanish right along with her. But the state funding formula, the certification policies are such that when she goes to school in the morning, she may be taking, even though we live in Florida, a class from a teacher in Washington State who is teaching students from 50 different states at the same time. Those are the types of things that can happen if states will grasp these different 10 elements, and that's my little point of personal privilege.